I work as a nanny for parents who work from home, and their constant meetings behind closed doors during my shifts are making this job unbearable. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I need to get this off my chest because I'm genuinely losing my mind, and I don't know if I'm overreacting or if this situation is as bizarre as it feels. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 26 years old, and I've been working as a professional nanny for about 4 years now. I have my certifications in early childhood education, CPR training, the whole 9 yards. I love what I do. There's something incredibly rewarding about watching kids grow and learn, about being part of their development during those crucial early years. Before this job, I worked for 2 different families, and both experiences were wonderful. The parents were respectful, the boundaries were clear, and I felt valued as a childcare professional. 6 months ago, I was hired by the Hendersons. On paper, they seemed like the perfect family. Mark Henderson works in financial consulting, and his wife Sarah is some kind of marketing executive for a tech company. They have 2 kids, Emma, who's 4, and little Oliver, who just turned 2. The pay they offered was significantly better than my previous positions, about $38,000 annually, which is excellent for nanny work in our mid-sized city. They have a beautiful home in one of the nicer suburbs, with a fully stocked playroom, a backyard with a swing set, and they even said I could use their second car if I needed to take the kids anywhere. During the interview, both Mark and Sarah were charming. They explained that they both worked from home most days, which they framed as a positive thing. "We'll be here if you need anything," Sarah had said with a warm smile. "But we'll stay out of your way so you can do your job. We have a home office upstairs where we'll be working." That sounded reasonable to me. I'd worked for families with work-from-home parents before, and it had never been an issue. The first few weeks were actually pretty good. Emma is a sweet, energetic little girl who loves art projects and playing pretend. Oliver is still in that toddler phase where everything is either fascinating or terrifying, but he's a happy kid overall. Mark and Sarah would pop down occasionally to say hi to the kids during lunch or take a quick break, but they largely stayed upstairs in their office. I established routines with the children, planned activities, handled meals and naps. It felt like a normal, functional arrangement. But then things started getting weird. It began with the meetings. About a month into the job, I started noticing that Mark and Sarah would have these important meetings that required absolute silence in the house. Sarah would come downstairs, usually around 10 in the morning, and say something like, "We have a crucial client call in 15 minutes. Can you take the kids outside or maybe keep them in the playroom with the door closed? We need it to be really quiet." At first, I didn't think much of it. I work in childcare. I understand that business calls require a professional environment. So I'd bundle up the kids and take them to the backyard, or we'd have quiet time in the playroom with books and puzzles. The first few times, these meetings lasted maybe 30 to 45 minutes. Totally reasonable. But then the meetings started happening more frequently, and they got longer. By month 2, there would be days where Mark or Sarah would come down 3 or 4 times asking for quiet. "Another meeting just got scheduled," they'd say apologetically. "So sorry, we know this is disruptive." The meetings would stretch to an hour, sometimes 90 minutes. I found myself constantly shuffling the kids around, trying to keep 2 young children entertained and quiet for extended periods, which anyone who's worked with toddlers knows is basically an Olympic sport. What really started bothering me was the timing and the pattern. These meetings always seemed to happen when both Mark and Sarah were home, which was most days. They'd disappear into their office together, close the door, and I wouldn't see them for hours. When they'd finally emerge, they'd both look slightly flushed. Their clothes would be a bit disheveled, and they'd be unusually cheerful and relaxed. Sarah's hair, which was always perfectly styled in the morning, would be messier. Mark's shirt would sometimes be untucked when it had been tucked in before. I'm not an idiot. I started putting 2 and 2 together. The breaking point came about 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday morning, and I'd just gotten the kids settled with breakfast when Sarah came downstairs. She was wearing this silk robe, which was unusual because she was normally dressed for work by the time I arrived at 8. "Morning," she said brightly. "Mark and I have back-to-back meetings all morning. Like, probably until noon. Could you maybe take the kids to the park? I know it's cold, but we really need the house to be quiet." I looked outside. It was February, and the temperature was hovering around 35 degrees. Not dangerously cold, but not ideal for spending 3 or 4 hours at a park with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. "The park might be tough for that long in this weather," I said carefully. Maybe we could do a combination? Park for a bit, then maybe the library? Sarah's smile tightened just slightly. Actually, could you just stay out until noon? We have several very important consultations scheduled, and we can't have any interruptions. Maybe the indoor play place at the mall? The indoor play place was 25 minutes away. I'd be spending 50 minutes round trip in the car, plus paying for admission out of my own pocket since they hadn't offered to reimburse me, to give them a 4-hour window of alone time in their house. Sure, I said, because what else could I say? As I was loading the kids into my car, I saw Sarah heading back upstairs. Through the window, I could see Mark was already in their bedroom, and he wasn't anywhere near their actual home office. The bedroom. They were having their meeting in their bedroom. I spent 4 hours at that play place. Oliver fell asleep in his stroller after about 2 hours, and Emma got bored after 3, but I killed time anyway, grabbing a coffee, letting Emma pick out a treat from the food court. When I finally returned to the house at 12:15, Mark and Sarah were both downstairs, freshly showered, looking relaxed and happy. The home office door upstairs was still closed, and I could see that their bed was unmade through their bedroom door. "How was your morning?" Sarah asked cheerfully. I wanted to scream. After that day, I started really paying attention. I began documenting when these meetings happened, how long they lasted, and what condition Mark and Sarah were in before and after. The pattern was unmistakable. The meetings almost always happened when both of them were home. They always emerged looking like they'd just woken up from a nap, or like they'd been exercising. Sometimes Sarah would have taken a shower midday. The meetings were never on video calls that I could hear, despite them supposedly being client meetings or consultations. Their home office has pretty thin walls, and when they had actual work calls, I could usually hear at least the murmur of conversation. During these meetings, there was just music playing. Always music. I started feeling incredibly uncomfortable. I mean, I get it. They're married. They're attracted to each other. That's great. But I'm not their babysitter, so they can have sex in the middle of the day while they're supposed to be working. That's not what I signed up for. When they hired me, they explained they needed childcare during business hours, so they could focus on their demanding careers. This feels like a complete misrepresentation of the situation. The financial aspect also started bothering me. They're both supposedly in high-powered jobs, pulling in serious money. Mark mentioned once that he bills clients $300 an hour for his consulting work. If he's taking 3-hour lunch breaks 3 or 4 times a week, that's a lot of money he's not making. Unless he's lying about working those hours, which feels like fraud if he's billing clients for time he's not actually working. And Sarah's always on her laptop in the evenings and weekends, making up work she claims got pushed because of unexpected meetings during the day. So essentially, I think I'm being paid $38,000 a year to be their cover story, to give them plausible deniability. Oh, we can't possibly be doing anything inappropriate. Our nanny and children are home. Except I'm being actively removed from the home so they can do exactly what they want to do. It gets worse. About a week ago, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Mark came downstairs. He was wearing sweatpants and no shirt, which was unusual because he normally dresses in at least casual business attire during the day. "Hey, could you take the kids upstairs to the playroom?" he asked. "We have a meeting in about 5 minutes and we need the main floor clear." "Clear?" I repeated. "Yeah, just, we need privacy. The playroom's got everything you need, right?" The playroom is directly above their bedroom. I've heard things. Not a lot, because I always turn on music or put on a show for the kids to cover any noise, but I've heard enough to confirm exactly what kind of meetings are happening. I took the kids upstairs, feeling humiliated and angry. This is not my job. I'm a childcare professional, not their alibi. Yesterday, things came to a head. Sarah asked me if I could start coming in an hour earlier, at 7 instead of 8 3 days a week. When I asked why, she said they needed to start having early morning strategy sessions before the workday began. I just stared at her. Strategy sessions. Yes, for our businesses. We're trying to coordinate our schedules better and plan our week. The way she said it, she couldn't even look me in the eye. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I'm done. I'm so done. I've started looking at other nanny positions because this situation is completely untenable. But I'm also worried about what happens if I just quit. I need the income, and finding a new position with comparable pay might take weeks or even months. I have rent to pay, student loans from my early childhood education program, a car payment. I can't just walk away without something lined up. There's also a part of me that feels bad for Emma and Oliver. They're innocent kids who've gotten attached to me, and I've gotten attached to them. Emma drew me a picture last week of our family that included me, and it broke my heart. These kids don't deserve to have another caregiver suddenly disappear from their lives because their parents can't behave professionally. But I also feel taken advantage of in a way that makes my skin crawl. Every time Sarah comes downstairs in that silk robe or Mark appears shirtless to announce another meeting, I feel disrespected. They're treating me like I'm stupid, like I can't figure out what's happening. And they're using me, using the presence of their children and their employee as some kind of kinky element of whatever they've got going on. I never consented to be part of anyone's sex life, but that's effectively what's happening. I've thought about confronting them directly, but what would I even say? Hey, I know you're not actually having work meetings, you're having sex, and I'm uncomfortable being part of this arrangement. That's a conversation that could go nuclear really fast. They could deny everything, act offended, and fire me on the spot. Then I'd be out of a job with no severance and no good reference. I considered talking to my nanny agency, but they just facilitate initial placements. Once you're hired, you're basically on your own in terms of managing the relationship with the family. Plus, I don't know how to explain this situation without sounding like I'm making wild accusations. The parents are having too much sex during work hours. Sounds insane when I say it out loud. My best friend thinks I should just stick it out until I find something new and not rock the boat. They're paying you well, the kids are good, just put in your earbuds and ignore it, she said. But she doesn't understand how demeaning this feels. Every single day, multiple times a day, I'm being asked to facilitate what is essentially their sex schedule. I'm rearranging my carefully planned activities, disrupting the kids' routines, sometimes spending my own money on entertainment venues, all so two adults can have afternoon romps while pretending they're working. My mom, who's been a career woman her whole life, thinks I'm overreacting. Lots of couples have active sex lives, she said. Just be grateful they're not fighting or making you uncomfortable in other ways. But this does make me uncomfortable. The deception makes me uncomfortable. The disruption to my work makes me uncomfortable. The fact that they're essentially lying to their employers or clients about their availability makes me uncomfortable. I've started applying to other positions, but the job market for nannies is competitive, and I'm picky about the families I work with because I've learned that not all childcare situations are created equal. I need good pay, reasonable parents, and kids who aren't terrors. That combination isn't easy to find. In the meantime, I'm stuck in this bizarre situation where I'm essentially being paid to enable my employer's sex life while caring for their children. I keep meticulous records now of every meeting they have, with times and dates, just in case things blow up and I need to defend myself or prove a pattern of behavior. I've documented instances where they've asked me to leave the house with the kids on very short notice. I've kept receipts from the times I've had to pay for activities out of pocket because their urgent meetings disrupted our normal schedule. Part of me wants to believe I'm misreading the situation, that there's some other explanation for their behavior. Maybe they really are having intense business meetings and they're just very passionate about their work. But no, I know what I'm seeing. I know what those extended meetings are. I know why they both emerge looking satisfied and sleepy. I know why their bedroom is always disheveled afterward. I just don't know what to do about it anymore. Do I confront them? Do I quietly job hunt and leave without explanation? Do I say something to a lawyer about creating a hostile work environment, even though they're not being overtly inappropriate toward me personally? I don't know what my rights are in this situation. I'm not even sure this qualifies as anything legally actionable. They're not harassing me sexually. They're not asking me to participate in anything. They're just using the presence of their employee and children as cover for their personal activities, which feels wrong, but might not technically be illegal. What I do know is that I can't keep doing this. My mental health is taking a hit. I dread going to work now, which is something I never experienced with previous families. I find myself getting anxious every morning, wondering how many times I'll be interrupted today, how many times I'll have to quickly change plans with the kids because Mark and Sarah need privacy. Emma has started asking why we always have to leave the house suddenly, and I don't know what to tell her. Your parents need alone time feels inappropriate to say to a 4-year-old about her own parents. The other day, Emma asked me, Why does mommy always go upstairs with daddy during the day? Don't they have work? And I had to scramble for an answer that wouldn't confuse her or make her think something was wrong. They're having important grown-up conversations, I said, which felt like such a weak explanation. I'm writing this today because this morning was particularly bad. I arrived at 8 to find both Mark and Sarah still in their pajamas, which almost never happens. Sarah immediately asked if I could take the kids to the Children's Museum, which is a 40-minute drive away, because they had critical meetings scheduled all day. All day? I asked. Well, until at least 3 or 4, Sarah said. We're really sorry, we know it's an imposition. We'll reimburse you for gas and admission. So they want me to keep their children, who are 4 and 2 years old, entertained outside the house for 7 or 8 hours so they can have an extended intimacy session. That's what this has become. I'm not a nanny anymore. I'm a paid excuse for them to have guilt-free marathon sex on a weekday. I told Sarah I'd take the kids to the museum, but only until lunch, and then we'd need to come home because Oliver needs his afternoon nap and it's not good for him to miss it. She looked disappointed but agreed. As I was loading the kids into the car, I heard music start playing upstairs, the same playlist they always use during their meetings. I felt sick to my stomach. I'm sitting in the museum cafeteria right now, writing this on my phone while the kids eat chicken nuggets and apple slices. Oliver's starting to get cranky, which means nap time is approaching. Emma's getting tired too. In about 30 minutes, I'm going to pack them up and drive back to the house, whether Mark and Sarah are done with their meeting or not. Those kids need their routines, and I need to start standing up for myself and for them. I don't know what's going to happen when I get back. Maybe they'll be finished. Maybe they won't be, and I'll walk in on an awkward situation. Maybe they'll be angry that I came home early. I don't really care anymore. I've reached my limit. I guess I'm writing this to ask, am I crazy? Is this situation as inappropriate as I think it is? Or am I being a judgmental prude who needs to mind my own business? Because right now, I genuinely can't tell if I'm the problem or if they are. All I know is that I can't do this anymore, and something has to change. Update 1. I didn't expect this post to get any attention at all, honestly. I just needed to vent to people who might understand, because everyone in my real life seems to think I'm either overreacting or should just ignore it. But reading through the comments, I realized that I'm not crazy. This situation is completely inappropriate, and I needed to do something about it. So I did. After I wrote that post from the museum cafeteria, I packed up the kids and headed back to the Henderson house. It was around 1 in the afternoon, which was earlier than Sarah had wanted us home. But like I said, Oliver needed his nap, and Emma was getting cranky. As a childcare professional, my responsibility is to the children's well-being, not to their parents' sex schedule. The drive back was stressful. I kept rehearsing in my head what I might say if they confronted me about coming home early. I decided I was going to be direct, professional, and firm. Something like, the children needed to come home for their nap routine. Their schedule is important for their development and can't be disrupted this frequently. When I pulled into the driveway, both cars were there, which meant Mark and Sarah were obviously still home. The house looked quiet from outside. I got Oliver out of his car seat first. He was already half asleep, then helped Emma out. She was carrying a little stuffed elephant she'd gotten from the museum gift shop that I'd bought with my own money, another expense I'd have to track for reimbursement. I used my key to open the front door and immediately noticed the music playing upstairs. That same playlist. My stomach churned, but I pushed forward. Oliver was heavy in my arms, nearly asleep, and Emma was holding my hand, dragging her new elephant. "We're home," I called out, loudly enough to be heard over the music. I wanted to give them warning, not because I cared about their comfort, but because I didn't want Emma or Oliver to see anything inappropriate. The music cut off abruptly. There was a moment of silence, then rushed footsteps and muffled voices. I took Emma to the playroom and settled her with some books, then carried Oliver to his room and laid him down in his crib. He was asleep before I even left the room. Poor little guy was exhausted. When I came back downstairs, Sarah was in the kitchen. Her hair was wet, like she'd just jumped in the shower, and she was wearing different clothes than she'd had on that morning. Yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. No makeup. She looked flustered. "You're back early," she said. Her tone wasn't quite accusatory, but it wasn't friendly either. Oliver needed his nap, I said, and Emma was getting tired. I did mention I'd be back after lunch. I thought you'd stay out longer, Sarah said. She opened the refrigerator, not looking at me, just staring into it like she was searching for something specific. We weren't quite finished with our meetings. That word, meetings. Something inside me snapped. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice level and professional, can we talk? She turned to look at me, and I could see the defensiveness already forming in her expression. Of course. What's up? I took a breath. I need to be honest with you about something that's been bothering me. The frequent requests for me to keep the kids out of the house for extended periods is making it very difficult to do my job effectively. The children need consistent routines and schedules, and constantly disrupting those routines isn't good for them. Sarah closed the refrigerator and crossed her arms. We've explained that our work requires privacy sometimes. We both have very demanding careers with important clients. I understand that, I said, choosing my words carefully. But the frequency and duration of these meetings is unusual. I've worked for other work-from-home parents before, and this level of disruption is unprecedented in my experience. Are you saying we're asking too much of you? Her voice had an edge now. I'm saying that I was hired to provide childcare during your working hours, but increasingly I'm being asked to remove the children from their own home for hours at a time on very short notice. It's affecting their routines. It's requiring me to spend my own money on activities and transportation, and it's making it difficult for me to provide the quality of care that I pride myself on. Sarah's face had gone red. We reimburse you for expenses. Sometimes, I said. Not always. And honestly, Sarah, the reimbursement isn't the main issue. The issue is that I'm a nanny, not a babysitter. There's a difference. My job is to facilitate your children's development, create educational activities, maintain healthy routines, and provide consistent care. I can't do any of that effectively when I'm constantly being asked to leave the house or keep the children away from entire sections of their own home. There was a long silence. Sarah was staring at me, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I was implying. What exactly are you suggesting? She finally asked. This was it. The moment where I either backed down or said what we both knew was true. I'm not suggesting anything, I said carefully. I'm simply stating that the current arrangement isn't working for me professionally. I need to be able to do my job properly, and I need the work environment to be conducive to providing quality childcare. Whatever meetings you and Mark are having, they're impacting my ability to care for your children effectively. Mark appeared in the doorway then. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, also different clothes from the morning. His hair was damp too. Everything okay? He asked, looking between Sarah and me. We're just having a conversation about scheduling, Sarah said tightly. I turned to include Mark in the conversation. I was explaining to Sarah that I'm finding it difficult to maintain proper routines for the children with the current frequency of requests to keep them out of the house. As their nanny, my professional opinion is that the disruptions are becoming problematic for their development. Mark and Sarah exchanged a look. A whole conversation happened in that look, the kind that only happens between people who know each other extremely well. We hear what you're saying, Mark said finally. Maybe we have been asking a lot lately. Work's been stressful for both of us. I didn't say anything. I just waited. We'll try to be more mindful of the kids' schedules, Sarah added, and we'll make sure you're properly reimbursed for any expenses. It wasn't an acknowledgement of what was really happening, but it was something. A recognition that they'd been pushing boundaries. I appreciate that, I said. I just want to be clear that going forward, I need to prioritize the children's routines. If you need privacy for work meetings, I'm happy to keep the kids occupied in the house, but asking me to leave for hours at a time isn't sustainable. Another look between them. Then Mark nodded. That's fair. The conversation ended there, but the tension in the air was thick. I went back upstairs to check on Emma, who had fallen asleep on the playroom floor next to her new elephant. I carried her to her room and put her in bed, then sat in the hallway for a minute, just breathing. I'd done it. I'd confronted them, sort of. I hadn't accused them directly of anything, but I'd made it clear that I knew something was going on and that it needed to stop affecting my work. It felt like a small victory, but I wasn't naive enough to think the problem was solved. The rest of that day was awkward. Mark and Sarah both stayed in their actual home office, doors open, and I could hear them on legitimate work calls. When the kids woke up from their naps, both parents came down to spend time with them, which was nice but also unusual. It felt performative, like they were trying to prove they were actually working and actually parenting. That evening, after I'd left for the day, Sarah texted me. Mark and I talked, and we want to apologize for any inconvenience our schedules have caused. We'll be more considerate moving forward. Also, we're adding a $500 bonus to your next paycheck for all the extra flexibility you've shown. $500. Hush money, basically. Or guilt money. I wasn't sure which, but I wasn't going to turn it down either. I responded with a simple, "Thank you, I appreciate that," and left it there. The next few days were better. There were still meetings, but they were shorter and less frequent. Sarah would ask if I could keep the kids in the playroom for an hour, which was manageable. They stopped asking me to leave the house entirely. It felt like we'd reached some kind of unspoken understanding. They'd be more discreet. I wouldn't call them out directly, and everyone could maintain plausible deniability. But then, about a week after our kitchen conversation, something happened that changed everything. It was a Thursday morning. I arrived at 8 as usual, and Sarah met me at the door, which was unusual. She normally was already upstairs working by the time I got there. "Morning," she said. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. "Can we talk for a minute before you get started with the kids?" "Of course," I said, immediately on alert. We went into the living room. Mark was there too, sitting on the couch, also looking serious. "We want to be transparent with you about something," Sarah started. She and Mark were holding hands, I noticed. "The reason we've been having so many meetings during the day, the reason we've needed so much privacy, is because we've been working with a marriage counselor." I blinked. That was not what I'd been expecting. "We do it over video chat," Mark added. "We've been having sessions 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more. We should have explained that from the beginning, but it felt private, and we were embarrassed." "Marriage counseling," I repeated. "Yes," Sarah said. She looked embarrassed but sincere. "We've been going through a rough patch. Nothing that affects the kids, but we've been struggling to connect, to communicate. The counseling has been helping, but the sessions are intense and emotional. That's why we've needed the privacy, and why we sometimes need time afterward to decompress together before going back to work." I sat there processing this. Marriage counseling. It was plausible. It would explain the regular scheduling, the need for privacy, the emotional state they seemed to be in afterward. But something about it didn't quite add up. "The sessions are during the day?" I asked. "Our counselor has limited availability," Mark explained. "She has evening slots booked for months out, but she had daytime openings. Since we both work from home, we figured we could make it work." "And the reason you've needed the house quiet, needed us out sometimes?" I asked. "The sessions can get heated," Sarah admitted. "We didn't want the kids to hear us fighting or crying or going through difficult conversations, and afterward we usually need some time to just be together, to reconnect physically." Physically. There it was. The admission that at least some of what I'd suspected was accurate. "We're not having affairs," Sarah said quickly, reading my expression. "We're not doing anything inappropriate. We're just trying to save our marriage, and sometimes that means we need privacy to work through things together." I didn't know what to say. If they were telling the truth, I'd completely misjudged the situation. I'd assumed they were just having excessive midday sex for fun, being selfish and inappropriate. But if they were actually in marriage counseling, dealing with serious relationship issues, then I'd been unfairly judgmental. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said slowly. "It helps me understand the situation better." "We should have been upfront from the start," Mark said. "We just didn't want anyone to know we were struggling. We didn't want the kids to pick up on it, and we didn't want you to feel uncomfortable or think we were unprofessional." "Going to therapy isn't unprofessional," I said. "It's actually really healthy that you're working on your relationship." Sarah's eyes got a little teary. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for being patient with us. We know it hasn't been easy." We talked for a few more minutes. They explained that their counselor had actually recommended they schedule regular reconnection time after their sessions, which is why they'd sometimes emerge from their meetings looking relaxed and happy. They assured me they'd try to schedule their sessions more consistently so I could plan around them, and they'd be more upfront about when they needed privacy and for how long. After that conversation, I felt like a complete asshole. Here I'd been, judging them, assuming the worst, when they were actually trying to work through marital problems and keep their family together. The shame was intense. I'd been so ready to believe they were being selfish and inappropriate, when really they were doing the hard work of therapy and trying to shield their children from their struggles. The next few weeks were much better. The meetings continued, but now that I understood what they were, I could be more supportive. Sarah would say, "We have counseling at 10, and I'd plan accordingly." Sometimes I'd hear raised voices from behind their office door, which I now understood was them working through difficult issues with their therapist. Other times there would be long periods of quiet, which I interpreted as intensive emotional work. I felt like we'd reached a new level of trust and understanding. They'd been vulnerable with me, shared something deeply personal, and I'd responded with empathy and professionalism. It felt good. But then, 3 weeks ago, the whole thing fell apart completely, and I realized I'd been played for a fool. Update 2. I need to preface this by saying I feel like the most naive, gullible idiot on the planet right now. I fell for their story completely, and I should have known better. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So for about 3 weeks after Mark and Sarah told me about their marriage counseling, everything was actually pretty good. I felt like I finally understood the situation, and I could work within those parameters. They'd say, "We have therapy today," and I'd take the kids to the playroom or outside, knowing they were doing important emotional work. I stopped resenting the interruptions, because I understood they were trying to save their marriage and protect their kids from witnessing their struggles. Sarah even opened up to me a bit more during that time. One afternoon, after a particularly long session, she came down to the kitchen where I was preparing snacks for the kids and just started talking. She told me they'd been together since college, that they'd gotten married young, had kids quickly, and somewhere along the way they'd lost sight of each other. The counseling was helping them rediscover why they fell in love in the first place. I remember feeling genuinely moved by this conversation. I told her I admired their commitment to working through their problems instead of just giving up. She actually teared up and hugged me, thanking me for being so understanding and for being such a wonderful presence in their kids' lives. God, I was such an idiot. The truth came out in the most unexpected way. 3 weeks ago, I was at a local coffee shop on my day off when I ran into a woman named Jennifer. She introduced herself as Mark's sister, which I didn't even know he had. Mark had mentioned he wasn't close with his family, but that was the extent of it. Jennifer was friendly, asked how I liked working for her brother and Sarah. We chatted for a few minutes about the kids, how Emma was doing in her pre-K class, how Oliver was starting to talk more. Nice, normal conversation. Then Jennifer said something that made my blood run cold. "I'm so glad they finally hired proper help," she said. "When Sarah called me a few months back asking if I knew any good nannies, I told her to go through an agency. She was worried about finding someone who wouldn't judge their lifestyle, but I told her the right person wouldn't care." "Their lifestyle?" I asked carefully. Jennifer looked at me, and I saw the moment she realized she'd said something she shouldn't have. "Oh," she said, "you know, the open marriage thing." I must have looked shocked because she immediately backpedaled. "I mean, I'm sure they've discussed it with you. They're very open about it with family." Open marriage, not marriage counseling, open marriage. I managed to finish the conversation without completely falling apart, but the second Jennifer left, I sat in that coffee shop and felt like I was going to be sick. Everything clicked into place. The frequent meetings, the way they both looked satisfied and happy afterward, the need for privacy, for me to be out of the house, the music, the disheveled appearances. They weren't going to marriage counseling. They were having sex. Lots of it. Probably experimenting, trying new things, living out their open marriage without any interruptions. And they'd lied to me about it. They'd made up this whole story about therapy and emotional work and reconnection, and I'd believed every word. The betrayal I felt was intense. Not because they had an open marriage, honestly, I don't care what consenting adults do in their private lives, but because they'd lied to me. They'd manipulated me. They'd seen that I was uncomfortable with the situation, So they'd crafted a story specifically designed to make me feel sympathetic and complicit. I went home and spent the rest of the day going over every conversation we'd had since their confession. All the little comments Sarah had made about their counselor's advice, the way Mark had talked about their communication exercises. All of it was bullshit. Calculated, manipulative bullshit designed to keep me in the dark and make me feel guilty for questioning them. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick, which I'd never done before. I needed time to think, to figure out what to do. Do I confront them? Do I quit immediately? Do I pretend I don't know and keep job hunting quietly? Sarah called me 3 times that day and sent several texts asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. The fake concern made me furious. I responded with brief messages saying I had a stomach bug and needed rest. By the end of that day, I'd made a decision. I was going to confront them, lay everything out, and quit. I'd give them 2 weeks' notice if they wanted it, but I was done. I couldn't work for people who'd manipulated me so thoroughly. The next morning, I showed up at their house at the usual time. Both Mark and Sarah were there, and they both immediately asked if I was feeling better. I said I was fine, and asked if we could have a conversation before I got started with the kids. We sat in their living room, the same place where they'd told me about their fake marriage counseling. I ran into Mark's sister Jennifer a few days ago. I started. I watched the color drain from both of their faces. It was almost satisfying. She mentioned something interesting, I continued. She talked about your open marriage. The silence was deafening. Sarah's mouth actually fell open slightly. Mark closed his eyes like he was in pain. There is no marriage counseling, is there? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. You made that up. More silence. Then Sarah said very quietly, "We can explain." "Please do," I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking with anger. Mark took a deep breath. "You're right. We're not in marriage counseling. We have an open marriage, and the time we've been asking for privacy is, well, it's for us, to be together." "I figured that much out," I said. "What I don't understand is why you lied about it. Why make up this elaborate story about therapy?" "Because you were clearly uncomfortable," Sarah said. She looked genuinely distressed. "After our conversation in the kitchen, we knew you'd figured out something was going on. We thought if we told you the truth, you'd judge us or quit. The marriage counseling story seemed like something you'd understand and accept." "So you manipulated me," I said flatly. "We didn't mean it that way," Mark said quickly. "We just needed you to feel comfortable enough to stay. You're amazing with the kids, and we didn't want to lose you. But you were fine with lying to me for weeks." Neither of them had an answer for that. "Do you know how stupid I feel?" I asked. "I actually felt sorry for you. I thought you were going through something difficult, and I wanted to be supportive. I felt guilty for judging you, and the whole time you were lying to my face." "We're sorry," Sarah said. She did look sorry, but I was past the point of caring. "We should have just been honest from the beginning." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But you weren't. You hired me under false pretenses. You told me you needed childcare during business hours so you could focus on your demanding careers. But really, you just wanted someone to watch your kids while you had sex in the middle of the day." "That's not fair," Mark said, a bit defensively. "We do work. We do have demanding careers." "Do your employers know you're taking 3-hour breaks to have sex?" I asked. "Are you billing clients for time you're not actually working?" Another uncomfortable silence. "That's what I thought," I said. "So not only have you been lying to me, you're potentially committing fraud against your employers and clients." "Now wait a minute," Mark started, but I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear it," I said. "I'm giving you my notice. I'll stay for 2 weeks if you need me to give you time to find someone else. But after that, I'm done." Sarah started crying, actual tears running down her face. "Please don't leave. The kids adore you. Emma talks about you constantly. We made a mistake, we admit that, but please don't punish the children for our stupidity." That hit me hard because she was right. Emma and Oliver weren't responsible for their parents' lies, but I also couldn't stay in this situation. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. I'm making a professional decision based on the fact that my employers have demonstrated they don't respect me or my work. You treated me like a fool, and I can't work in an environment where I don't trust the people I work for." We went back and forth for a while. They apologized repeatedly, tried to convince me to stay, offered me more money, promised they'd be completely honest from now on. But I'd made up my mind. My 2 weeks' notice stood. The last 2 weeks were incredibly awkward. I came in, did my job with the kids, and barely interacted with Mark and Sarah beyond necessary communications about the children. They'd try to make small talk, to joke around like we used to, but I kept things strictly professional. The kids picked up on the tension, especially Emma, who kept asking why everyone seemed sad. What made it worse was that during those 2 weeks, the meetings stopped entirely. Mark and Sarah suddenly had perfectly normal work schedules with no need for privacy or quiet. It was like they were trying to prove they could be professional employers, but it was too little too late. On my last day, Sarah tried one more time to convince me to stay. She cornered me in the kitchen while the kids were watching a show. "I know we messed up," she said, "but you're the best nanny we've ever had. The kids need stability. They need you. Can't we find some way to make this work?" I actually felt bad for her in that moment, which annoyed me because I didn't want to feel sympathy for someone who'd manipulated me. But I could see she was genuinely upset about losing childcare they'd come to depend on. "Sarah, I appreciate that you value my work," I said. "But this isn't about the money or even about what you and Mark do in your private time. This is about trust and respect. You lied to me for weeks. You saw how uncomfortable I was, and instead of having an honest conversation, you made up a story specifically designed to manipulate my emotions. I can't work for people who would do that." She nodded, tears in her eyes again. "I understand. I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry." My last day with Emma and Oliver was heartbreaking. Emma made me another drawing, this one of me and her holding hands under a rainbow. She asked when I was coming back, and I had to explain that I was moving to a new job to help other children, but that I'd always remember her. Oliver was too young to really understand, but he kept hugging me and saying "love you" in his toddler voice, and it absolutely destroyed me. Mark gave me my final paycheck with a generous severance bonus they weren't required to pay. The card attached said, "Thank you for everything. We're sorry things ended this way." I walked out of that house 2 weeks ago and haven't been back. I've been applying to other positions, and I have a few promising interviews lined up, including one with a family who seems genuinely wonderful and professionally appropriate. But here's the thing that's been eating at me. I still don't know if I did the right thing. I keep second-guessing myself. Yes, they lied to me, and yes, that was wrong. But was it worth leaving a job I otherwise liked? Was it worth disappointing those kids who didn't do anything wrong? Should I have just accepted their apology and moved forward? My friend group is split on this. Half think I was right to leave, that employers who lie don't deserve loyalty. The other half think I overreacted, that I should have set clearer boundaries about their personal life and stuck it out for the kids' sake. The thing that really bothers me is that I still feel used. Even now, even after leaving, I feel like they got what they wanted. They had months of me facilitating their sex life, whether I knew that's what it was or not. They paid me well for it, sure, but the money doesn't make the manipulation okay. And there's this nagging voice in my head that wonders if I should have seen through their marriage counseling story sooner. Looking back, there were holes in it. They never mentioned their counselor's name. Their sessions didn't follow a consistent schedule like real therapy would. When I'd ask how therapy was going, their answers were always vague. I wanted to believe them so badly because the alternative was too uncomfortable to accept. I wanted to believe they were good people working through problems, not people who would use their employee as cover for their lifestyle choices. I don't know. Maybe I'm still processing it all. Maybe in a few months I'll feel differently. But right now I just feel tired and disillusioned. I got into this career because I love children, and I believe in the importance of quality early childhood care. I never expected to end up in a situation like this, feeling used and disrespected by the very people who are supposed to be my employers and partners in raising their children. What really gets me is that they'll probably find another nanny without much trouble. They'll pay well, the kids are great, and they'll either lie to the next person too or find someone who doesn't care about their open marriage lifestyle. Life will go on for them, barely interrupted. Meanwhile, I'm out here trying to rebuild trust in this profession, wondering if every interview is with another family that will lie to me about why they really need childcare. Maybe I'm being too cynical. Maybe the next family will be honest and professional and wonderful, but this experience has definitely changed how I view the families I work for. I'll never be quite as trusting again, which makes me sad because I used to approach every new position with optimism and openness. I just wish they'd been honest from the start. That's what hurts the most. If they'd said, "We have an open marriage and we sometimes need privacy during the day for intimate time," I could have made an informed decision about whether that was a situation I was comfortable working in. I might have said no, but at least it would have been my choice based on honest information. Instead, they took that choice away from me by lying. They decided what I could and couldn't handle, what I should and shouldn't know. And that's what I can't forgive. Update 3. I wasn't going to write another update because I thought my story with the Hendersons was finished. I'd moved on. I was interviewing with new families, and I was ready to put the whole mess behind me. But something happened last week that I need to share because it's honestly made this entire situation even more complicated and confusing. I got a new position. A wonderful family with twin boys who are 3 years old. The Patel family. The parents are both doctors. They're warm and professional. And they were completely transparent during the interview process about their schedules, expectations, and family dynamics. It felt like a fresh start, and I was so relieved to be working in a normal, healthy environment again. I'd been with the Patels for about a week when I got a text from an unknown number. It was Mark Henderson. "I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but Sarah and I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet for coffee?" My first instinct was to ignore it. What could they possibly have to say that I'd want to hear? But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, both Mark and Sarah were already there, sitting at a corner table. They both looked terrible. Sarah had dark circles under her eyes, and Mark looked like he'd aged 5 years in the month since I'd seen him. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said as I sat down. "We weren't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "What's this about?" They looked at each other, and I saw the same kind of silent communication pass between them that I'd witnessed so many times in their house. Then Mark spoke. "After you left, we had to sit down and really examine our choices," he started. "Your resignation forced us to look at how we'd been behaving, how we'd been treating you, and using our home as a playground for our relationship. We hired another nanny," Sarah continued. "Or we tried to. We went through 3 different candidates in 3 weeks." "What happened?" I asked, not sure where this was going. "We were honest with them," Mark said. "From the very beginning, we explained that we have an open marriage and that we sometimes need privacy during the day. We thought being upfront was the right thing to do after what happened with you." "Okay," I said slowly. "And?" "2 of them immediately declined the position," Sarah said. "The third accepted, but lasted 4 days before she quit. She said she was uncomfortable with our lifestyle and felt like she was being asked to facilitate something she didn't agree with." I didn't say anything. I didn't really know what they expected me to say. "The thing is," Mark continued, "her reaction made us realize something. It wasn't the lying that was the problem with our arrangement with you. It was the arrangement itself." Sarah leaned forward. "We've been seeing an actual marriage counselor now, a real one, and we've been forced to confront the fact that our open marriage isn't actually working. It's been destroying our relationship with each other, our relationship with our kids, and our relationships with the people we employ." I was starting to understand where this was going, but I stayed quiet and let them talk. "Our counselor helped us see that we were using our lifestyle as a band-aid for deeper problems in our marriage," Mark said. "We weren't actually communicating. We weren't actually addressing our issues. We were just having sex and calling it connection. When we made up that story about being in marriage counseling, the irony is that it was exactly what we needed to hear," Sarah added. "We needed someone to tell us we were struggling and that we needed help, but we were too proud, too convinced we had everything figured out." They spent the next 20 minutes telling me about their journey over the past month. How Emma had started acting out at preschool, throwing tantrums and becoming aggressive with other kids. How Oliver had become clingy and anxious, crying whenever Sarah or Mark left his sight. how they'd finally realized that even though they thought they were protecting their kids from their marital issues, the kids were absorbing all the tension and instability in the household. "We're closing our open marriage," Sarah said. "We're doing actual therapy, both together and individually. And we're trying to figure out how to be real partners again, not just roommates who occasionally have sex." "That's good," I said carefully. "I'm glad you're getting help, but I'm not sure why you needed to tell me all of this." "Because we owe you an apology," Mark said. "A real one. Not the apologies we gave you when you quit, which were really just us trying to get you to stay. We owe you an apology for treating you like a prop in our dysfunction." Sarah's eyes were getting teary again. "You were right about everything. We did use you. We did treat you like you were stupid. We manipulated you and disrespected you, and we're deeply, profoundly sorry." I felt my own eyes getting hot. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear this. "We also wanted to tell you that we've been talking to our new counselor about the financial aspect," Mark continued. "About how I was billing clients for hours I wasn't actually working. You were right to call that out. I've been working with a lawyer and an accountant to review my billing practices from the past year. I'm going to be making some significant reimbursements to clients I overcharged." "That must be expensive," I said quietly. "About $80,000, he admitted. "But it's the right thing to do. I was committing fraud, like you said. The fact that no one had caught it yet doesn't make it okay." We sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop was busy around us, people ordering drinks and typing on laptops, completely unaware of the heavy conversation happening in the corner. "There's one more thing," Sarah said. "Emma has been asking about you constantly. She drew you at least a dozen more pictures. She keeps asking when you're coming back." My heart clenched. "I'm not coming back, Sarah. You know that." "We know," she said quickly, "and we're not asking you to. We found a nanny through a very reputable agency who's been wonderful with the kids, and we've been completely professional and appropriate with her. But Emma wants to see you. Just once, to say goodbye properly. She didn't understand why you left, and she thinks you're mad at her. The thought of Emma thinking I was angry with her was unbearable." "She doesn't think you're mad at her, does she?" I asked, horrified. "We've tried to explain that you got a new job and that it has nothing to do with her," Mark said. "But she's 4. She doesn't fully understand. She just knows that you disappeared." "Would you be willing to come over for an hour sometime?" Sarah asked. "Not to work, just to visit. Let Emma show you her art projects and tell you about preschool. Give her some closure." I thought about it. Every professional instinct told me to say no, to maintain boundaries, to keep the situation in the past where it belonged. But the thought of Emma thinking I'd abandoned her without a word was too painful. "I'll think about it," I said finally. We wrapped up the conversation shortly after that. They apologized again, thanked me for meeting with them, and we parted ways. I sat in my car afterward for a long time, processing everything they'd told me. The thing is, I do believe they're genuinely trying to change. The fact that they're in real therapy, that Mark is making financial restitution for his billing fraud, that they're actually examining their lifestyle choices, all of that speaks to real growth. But it doesn't erase what they did to me. It doesn't undo the manipulation and the lies. I talked to my new employers, the Patels, about the situation. I wanted to be transparent about the possibility of visiting my previous employer's home. Dr. Patel, who's a child psychiatrist, actually gave me some really good advice. "Closure is important for children," he said. "If you can provide that for this little girl without compromising your own well-being, it might be a gift you can give her. But make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and set very clear boundaries." So I decided I would visit. Once, on a weekend afternoon when the kids would be awake and alert, I'd spend an hour with Emma, let her show me her stuff, give her a proper goodbye. Then I'd leave and maintain the boundary I'd established. I texted Sarah and we set up a time for this past Saturday. I was nervous driving to their house, worried it would be awkward or that old resentments would bubble up. But when I arrived, Emma came running out of the house and threw herself into my arms with such joy that everything else fell away for a moment. "You came back!" she shrieked. "I knew you'd come back. I drew you so many pictures." Oliver toddled out after her, grinning and shouting, "Nana! Nana!" which was his version of my name. I picked him up with my other arm and just held both of them for a minute, feeling their little bodies pressed against me, breathing in their kid smell of apple juice and crayons. Sarah was standing on the porch, watching us with a sad smile. Mark was there too, hanging back. They both looked like they were witnessing something bittersweet. I spent an hour with the kids. Emma showed me every single art project she'd made since I left, a truly impressive number of drawings and paintings and craft projects. She told me about her new nanny, Miss Rachel, who she liked, but who wasn't as good at playing princess as you. Oliver followed me around the playroom, occasionally hugging my leg and offering me toys. It was both wonderful and heartbreaking. I'd missed these kids more than I'd realized. But I also knew, with absolute certainty, that leaving had been the right choice. This wasn't my family. These weren't my kids. I was their nanny for a season of their lives, and that season was over. When it was time to leave, Emma got upset. Not tantrum upset, just sad. She held my hand and asked, very seriously, "Are you ever coming back?" I knelt down to her level. "No, sweetie, I have a new job now with different children who need me, but I'll always remember you, and I'll always care about you, and Miss Rachel is going to take such good care of you." "But I want you," she said, her little voice breaking. "I know," I said gently, "and I want you to be happy. You know what makes me happy? Knowing that you're being a big girl, listening to Miss Rachel, being kind to Oliver, and making lots of art. Can you do those things for me?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with her fist. I gave her one last hug, then hugged Oliver, and then I walked out of that house for what I knew would truly be the last time. Sarah walked me to my car. "Thank you," she said. "This meant the world to her, to all of us." "She's a special kid," I said. "They both are. Take care of them." "We're trying," Sarah said. "We're really trying to be better, for them and for each other." I believed her. That was the surprising part. I actually believed that they were doing the work, making changes, trying to fix the damage they'd done to their family and to themselves. "I hope it works out," I said, and I meant it. As I drove away, I felt this strange sense of closure. Not healing exactly. The betrayal still stung, the manipulation still hurt, but I felt like the story was finally complete, like I could close the book on this chapter of my life and move forward without constantly wondering what if. My new position with the Patels is everything I hoped it would be. The twins are challenging but delightful. The parents are respectful and professional, and I'm not being asked to facilitate anyone's secret lifestyle or cover for anyone's lies. It's exactly what nannying should be, a professional relationship centered on the children's well-being. But I'll admit, the experience with the Hendersons changed me. I'm more cautious now, more alert to boundary violations, more willing to ask direct questions and demand honest answers. In a weird way, they taught me what I will and won't tolerate in my professional life. The price of that lesson was high, but at least I learned it.